Welcome into the Invest Well Show. I'm your host, Michael Wall. Got a great show lined up for you today. Wonderful guest, great friend, Pierre Douvier. Listen, this guy's a stud, international tax attorney. We're going to talk about a lot of great things as you're traveling the world and living life and investing well, all in the Invest Well Show today. So here we go. Again, Pierre Douvier, what a great guy and a beautiful family. Pierre, thanks so much for taking a few moments and joining us on the show.
My pleasure, Michael.
I'm so excited to have you here. And Pierre and I have really grown with his family, a great friendship over the years. It all started out, we were playing golf, and I hit a hole-in-one, and he came out and clapped. No, that's not how it started. Actually, how it did start is our kids were playing golf together.
Absolutely.
And then that's how we met, and it's just been several years, been really building a wonderful friendship. And we were having a conversation, and Pierre it's interesting, not only an international tax attorney, but he's, let me get this right, I wrote it down, a lecturer for 28 years now in the Law University in Paris. You've worked with some very high-end clientele all throughout the world and governments throughout the world in relation to tax, international tax. In fact, I would read it to you, but I cannot read this language, French, okay? Big book, but a lot of great information here on international tax law. And Pierre, I just want to talk for a minute about, why don't we start out with living abroad, living throughout the world, what you're seeing as you travel country to country, just the sentiment. You know, you've been in America, you've been in Monaco, which is where you're based, or Monaco is how they say it. What do you see as far as the difference of living area to area?
If you're talking about the tax aspect of it, in fact, what you are really realizing is that in this world now, there is like a general and common rule which is applicable all worldwide. So it means that wherever you are going, wherever you're going to be a resident, the tax system is not that different from one country to the other. And that is, the reason is that, in fact, with what we call the Global Forum and the OECD, which is, how would I say, the rules are the same with your rules in America as about FATCA. It means that, in fact, you will have to face the same system. And globally, the same tax rates. Of course, you will have countries where you have smaller rates, and some country like Switzerland in Europe where you have no tax at all on private investment, but otherwise you will have the same system, the same rules.
So let me ask you this question, because you know there's a common thought, and we have some clientele that we work with in some of our private firms, helping them where they have question about investing internationally and the benefit of maybe protecting against currency risk and all that kind of things. But initially, the focus or the thought comes around the idea of taxes. Hey, if I put some money here, put some money there. What does it look like from a U.S. citizen, Pierre, putting money in other countries to avoid taxation?
Okay, in fact, basically, you can avoid very easily the taxation because for non-resident, normally there is no taxation on investment that are made in Europe because that's the domestic law. So it's a pure American consequence, meaning that as you are American and because of your citizenship, which rule does not apply in other countries, you are taxed here because you have the citizenship, the American citizenship. Yeah. So it's a pure American tax aspect. In the European countries, when you invest in interest, in private equity or wherever, domestic law does not provide any taxation.
Okay, so if you're an American, U.S. citizen, and you say, I want to invest $1 million in another country, you still have applicable U.S. tax.
Absolutely.
But the other countries may not have tax. So a lot of people think that they're in a place where if I put money somewhere else, I'm going to completely avoid taxes altogether, when that may not necessarily be true because they're still subject to the U.S. tax code.
Absolutely. Right? And if they would try just to forget about being taxed, the FATCA system is such that anyway you will have have to report, and if you don't, the bank will report all your income back to the U.S.
I see. So that's a global system.
It is.
So regardless of if you're, so in other words, I remember we were talking the other day about Monaco, and obviously if you're a citizen there, that's your residency, citizenship, I guess, if you will, the elimination of tax there, which is wonderful. But if you're a U.S. citizen, you don't have that same benefit.
Absolutely. And that's the reason why when I see American, even from Florida, investing in France or in Monaco, we avoid any tax locally, but you cannot avoid in the US.
Yeah.
And if you want, because that most of the time there is an inheritance aspect in this. And in this case, what we have to put in place, and the Americans should know that, it's a trust or something like that, so that, in fact, at the end of the day, you can escape the tax in the U.S. Because, again, it's not an issue in European countries. Well, sorry, about inheritance tax, it can be also an issue in the European countries. I was speaking about income tax and capital gains tax.
Okay, so in relation to somebody, let's say, Pierre, somebody was saying, let's switch gears a little bit, and somebody's talking about currency, right? They're worried about currency. We've seen all this digital currency today, right, with Bitcoin and all of these other cryptos and things like that, and there's fear from a lot of people, at least in America, that I've seen, sentiment and fear, that they're worried about the U.S. dollar. And they're worried about the stability of the dollar in relation to, that you see a lot of people in the past that have said, well, it's not backed by gold anymore. There's really nothing backing it up, whatever it may be. And a lot of the conversation that we have had with some of the families we work with and also in other commentaries, the fact that, from research, there's roughly about 70% or so of transactions in the globe that happen with the U.S. dollar. So from my perspective, it's really a good place to be, even though we want to be aware of what's happening internationally with other currencies. What is your thought as far as protecting and country to country and what that looks like? Do you have you want to weigh in on that at all, Pierre?
Yeah, you know what? I have, as I'm dealing mostly with families, you are not reasoning the same way as for corporations. So you are working on generations. So you have, first of all, to be sure that if you don't understand something, you should not do it. And this is where you have to be very certain that the system where you enter into, you can understand it and you can handle it. Otherwise, I would say that you should not go into that. Now, coming to your specific question, I think that anyway, in this type of investment you are referring to, I don't see why you would change the currency. The US dollar, whatever the people think, is the number one currency. So if you invest in Europe, why don't you invest in US dollars? Because
Using
you
US
can have
dollars.
a US account, end of the story. And as I told you, because you don't have any tax there, because you are non-resident of those countries, it means that it's, again, only a U.S. issue.
Yeah, U.S. tax only. Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right, so let's talk about living abroad. Here you are, and by the way, if you didn't know this, if you're in America, I didn't know this. Right now, I know it's not. To us, it's Monaco. To them, it's Monaco. Right. So that's just so you got it, the right vernacular. But when you're there, you got the Formula One. You got all kinds of stuff happening there. What do you love about where you live?
Well, first of all, you live in a village because it's one maybe of the smallest country in the world.
Okay.
So it's a village. It's a good thing and a bad thing. So it means that when you walk at the street, you've got always one guy who say, "Oh, I've got an issue. I've got a problem.
Yeah.
Can you solve that?" So sometimes you hide.
Everybody knows you.
Well, I'm afraid yes.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's really like. Living in Florida because you have a nice weather. Remember that the previous princess was an American woman, Princess Grass.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yes. And so that means that for a number of years, we had a lot of Americans. Now we have less Americans. And that's bad because we want them to come back, to be very honest.
So as you come to the States, and you guys have come to Florida for a long time.
Yes.
In the Palm Beach area in particular. What do you love about coming here?
Totally freedom. You
What do
have.
you mean by that?
I mean, you have the feeling that you can do whatever you want. So it's not that true, because I know that based on your computer things and so on, you are framed. That's true. But everything is possible here in this country. In our countries, there are a lot of regulations, a lot. I know you have also regulations, but you have a flexibility.
Yeah. So just the feeling of freedom.
The feeling of freedom.
As you come here.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting? And, as you're watching this, when we talk about investments, when we talk about life in general, it's you can get used to what you're used to. And unfortunately, sometimes we don't realize that the sentiment in other countries in the world, regardless of what the news tells you, is the reality of just what Pierre is discussing. And you've worked with many, many wealthy families and large corporations in the world. So you've seen the sentiment from many, right?
Absolutely. In fact, when I began my career, I was working with American firms, which means that I've been educated by the Americans. So I have this way of thinking that everything is possible. And most of my clients say, but I say, yes, it's always possible. There is always a solution. And that comes from my education with the American companies.
I love that. What would you say, Pierre, in relation to the international tax law? We're going to jump back into that just for a minute. And I love what you're talking about when you say, if you don't understand something, don't do it, right?
No,
I mean, be aware of what you're doing and how
you are a
it
family.
works.
You have to protect your assets.
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't listen, sorry to say that, to lawyers or to this type of people who
may
not. Yeah, because it's not, I've seen that most of the time in Europe and also in America. People like lawyers, they think that they know everything. But, you have to live in the real world.
Yeah.
And so you have to understand what you are stepping into. For instance, most of the time, I've got referrals, and the client come to me and say, look, somebody says that to me. I say, no, that's wrong. You should do that. It's because those people, they think with their own mind, with their own country, their own culture. And this is wrong. When you live in an international atmosphere, you have to think about the others and how they are going to react. It's very cultural. I always say tax is a matter of culture.
That's interesting. And when you look at that, so you've seen a lot of people over the years that have gotten bad advice.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way it is. People think with their pocketbooks and their wallets,
yes,
sometimes, instead of just...
sometimes they are of good faith.
Just don't
Most of the time, they don't know, and they think that it is as in their country. So I took the example of Luxembourg. I can take the same in the UK or whatever. So, and I'm used to saying that when you have somebody who is advising you, you have to be sure that he can say to you, look, I'm not competent. But you have to go to this person and we will work with him. It's very important.
And that is actually, that's actually a valuable trait. A lot of people don't know what they want. We talk about this a lot in our space, in the financial space, right? As far as investing, whether it's private equity or direct real estate or other opportunities. And when we see families in the firms, whether it be Wall Private Wealth or U.S. Private Wealth, they'll come in and they'll say, well, geez, I'm not familiar with some of these things. And I'm a big believer that a lot of people don't know what they want because they don't know what's available.
Yeah, when I start a meeting, I never talk. I hear, I listen to the people, and I ask questions because you have to understand. When I began my career and my boss said to me, oh, you're working for this company, all-American company. You know what? Go and see them on site, go in their plants and see how they work and come back, and then you will see that you will answer differently.
Yeah.
It's the same for families.
Yeah.
You have to understand the families, all the relationship. You know that in a family, sometimes it's very complicated, and that has an impact in legal and in tax aspects.
Yeah, you got to pay attention. The Socratic method of leading people to a decision, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Telling is not selling,
Absolutely.
asking questions. Very important, understanding.
And you have to make an update very regularly because in international tax, it's an evolution of every day. You cannot imagine the number of information we receive on our mails. You have to read a lot. I spend 30% of my time in reading.
Wow. And how, so as you've seen this, the laws and everything kind of evolve, where do you see taxes going in the future? Do you have any thought on that as far as where you see international tax going?
Yes, I think that now we are going to face something which is good is what I call the substance. It means that now you got a lot of people who were doing shell companies, who were doing something rather artificial. It's over. It's over for some time, and in the future, in the 2 or 3 years, you will see that we are going to focus on where the people are actually living. They cannot pretend anything, and where their companies are, what we call the substance. And that's it's the trend in the future years. I am lucky to represent foreign authorities at the international organization. So I see where we are leading, and this is exactly where we are leading.
It's interesting, and I think some of that probably has been brought on by the digital age. It's hard, we have such a digital footprint, Pierre, now that it's like there's not much that you can do. Before, you could send and do and whatever, but today...
This is a very good remark. Tax is exactly opposite to digital. It means that whatever you do on digital, we will go back on the basic, and we will look at where do you do the things and where from. And you will have to give the evidence of that. If you don't, then you will have a really problem with any tax authorities. And remember that any tax authorities in the world have a contradictory interest because they want their share of the cake.
Right.
So it means that you have to be very careful.
Everybody likes cake. And I don't know if it's chocolate or vanilla or extra icing with ice cream. I don't know what you like, but everybody likes some cake, and they want their piece, right?
Yes, right.
Well, it's been an interesting conversation, and I think one of the big things that I pulled out there is if you don't understand something completely, don't just jump into it. There's a lot of fear. Maybe we'll end it with this, Pierre. There's a lot of fear out there from the media and all these other things that causes people to say, I think I'm going to go do this, or I think I'm going to go do that. And what is your comment on that?
Yes, and don't forget your common sense. People, most of the time, have forgotten the common sense. When I say don't do something that you don't understand, it's also don't think that the guys who are in front of you are the people who are going to take the right decision. It's you who is going to take the decision. The councils are only councils. They are not the payers, as we say back in Europe. So you have to be very careful. Common sense is one, and understanding what you're doing.
So what he mentioned there, if you didn't get that, and just a little bit of the translation. So he's talking about the idea of when you hire counsel, when you hire legal counsel, right? You are ultimately the one, because you're paying, you're the client, you are ultimately the one that gets to make the decision. And it's very important that you are making decisions from a sound mind, making sure that you understand what's happening. You may not know all the details of everything. That's why you hire a counsel, right? They bring education and advice, but you need to make it in such a way that it's common sense, and you are the client, not them.
And don't stick to only one counsel. You can have your family counsel, your main counsel, and me, even to my clients, and say, you know what, please take another advice, so that you will come back to me and you will see that I may be right, and don't hesitate to do that. You have always to cross the information.
That's important. So make sure you're getting information. It's almost like, I kind of, in a simple format in our world today, we're so bombarded with so much media, right? And sometimes you're like, wait a minute, you got these people over here talking about this, and you got these people over here talking about this, and they're just completely different, right? And so you say, there's got to be somewhere in the middle. What if you're in a place where all you do is listening to this, or all you're doing is listening to this, you're never going to find the middle. And so that's what you're talking about, Pierre, is getting advice from different experts along the way.
Absolutely. You have to keep your expert, the person that you know. And what I saw also is that if your regular expert does not want a second opinion, something is wrong.
Something is wrong. Yeah, the truth is always open to more information because they know that they're doing it right and doing it from the right perspective. Well, that's a great conversation, Pierre. Any last thing you want to share about living all over the world?
International law is it's fun for me. So you should have fun also in international tax, and you should not think that it is something that you have to suffer. There are a lot of things to do, and just like
to
a
navigate.
Game. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's why you've been a lecturer in Paris for 28 years, because you love it. And
I love it.
And I remember what you said about you're now in a season of you got to give back the knowledge that you've learned for years and years and years of doing this.
Yeah, it's also because I'm a little lazy, I've done those books so that they are not going to go to me to ask questions. Read my book.
Read the book.
And my rights, my IP rights, they go to the university. So it's not a question of money.
I love that. I love that. Well, listen, as always, Pierre, thanks for joining us on the show today.
It was a very good pleasure.
Enjoy the conversation. And if you're listening to this and you have questions, maybe internationally, depending on where you are, you could be from obviously with the digital age anywhere in the world, or if you are here in America and you have questions about international tax, you have questions about what I should be doing with maybe our family wealth or portfolio, etc. In relation to taxes, you can always reach out to our team. Head over to leanonthewall.com. If there's a need, obviously we can bring Pierre in. He doesn't want any more clients, but we can maybe figure that out somehow, some way, and get the kind of advice necessary from an international perspective. And remember, as we talked about kind of throughout the show, it's very important to pay attention along the way so you make good decisions. You are responsible for the decisions that you make, and it's so important to be knowledgeable and involved in the process, right? Be involved in what you're doing. If you have a cell phone, you're listening to this on your phone, maybe podcast or YouTube, wherever you're watching this show or listening to this show, I know you probably got a couple friends that need to hear this because they're listening to media, they're listening to sources that are not necessarily doing this day in and day out. And that's why I wanted to have Pierre on the show to talk about here's what's happening. He's not trying to sell you anything or sell you a product, just share with you the reality that there is some consequences and some benefits when you really look in to what you're doing. So share this show with them, get them in a place where they can be educated. And as always, my desire is to help you live on purpose so you can live with purpose. Thanks for dialing in, and we'll talk to you next show. Thank you for listening to the Invest Well Show. Please note that this information shared on the show is not investment advisory advice, and it may not be reflective of your personal situation or the needs that you have. If you have questions specific to your financial situation, please make sure that you reach out to an investment advisor directly or a tax attorney or tax coach or CPA to help you with your personal situation. Any additional questions that you may have, please make sure that you seek out a professional to get the guidance needed for your specific situation. Again, all content and information shared on this show is not to be deemed as specific investment advisory advice.